Coming up on Lawmakers, disagreements over spending priorities force the supplemental budget into conference committee. Governor Perdue outlines 3 measures to help Clayton County's beleaguered school system. And we talk with Tom Crawford for a look back at this week under the Gold Dome. Those stories and more are coming up next.
This is Lawmakers, your source for all the news from under the Gold Dome. Here are your anchors, and Wandy Lawson and David Zelski.
Good evening, everyone. Also on Lawmakers, Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle talks about how his legislative priorities have fared this session.
And a bill that aims to stop so-called drug shopping passes the House Rules Committee. But first, our top story tonight, the House and Senate are unable to find common ground on the supplemental budget. The mid-year adjusted budget is headed to a conference committee. This after the House and Senate failed to reach an agreement on the supplemental budget today. Appropriations Chair Ben Harbin said the House would insist on a $6 million add to subsidize 48 hospitals that provide care for the poor.
The Senate took this money and applied it over to trauma, but specifically for ambulances and helicopters. Those are probably necessary needs that we'll need all over the state, but there's $53 million in there, and if the Trauma Commission decides that's a priority to other things within the trauma network, they will put it there.
The House also disagreed with the Senate reduction of the Public Defenders Council funding from the governor's $3.6 million recommendation.
The Senate said just $500,000. That's not enough. You're going to have people laid off, people losing their jobs, and we could find ourselves in federal court because we're not offering proper representation.
And education was the final sticking point.
We're committing ourselves, and we hope the Senate will commit with us, to still fund all of the programs we had under education, but we're committing that by putting the money aside for debt service, a little over $3 million, in the 09 document.
The House voted to agree to the Senate version of the supplemental budget if it included the House changes.
The Senate will adhere to the disagreement to the House amendment, the Senate substitute, and the conference committee will be appointed.
The Senate has disagreed with the supplemental budget. Chair insists on the position of the House as previously authorized in the record. Appoints as a committee of conference Representative Keene, Representative Harbin, Representative Burkhalter. That'll give y'all something to do over the weekend. Ex officio members are all other members of the House.
The Senate conferees are Tommy Williams, Eric Johnson, and Jack Hill. The conference committee is expected to immediately begin its discussions.
Governor Perdue steps in to help the Clayton County school system avoid losing its accreditation. Lawmakers Sandra Parrish joins us now with more. Sandra.
David, Governor Perdue wants to help Clayton County meet a September 1st deadline set by the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools to enact certain reforms in order to avoid losing accreditation. He outlined his plan with reporters this afternoon.
First, I have asked and will appoint 2 special liaisons to serve in an advisory role. Because we still want to preserve the principle of local control, I want to ask 2 experienced educators and board members to go to Clayton County to act in a voluntary advisory role to the Board of Education and to the school system. Secondly, I've offered the expertise of several of our state agencies to Clayton County Schools as they attempt to follow the steps that SACS has outlined to avoid losing that accreditation. The state auditor's office will review school financial audits. The Office of School Achievement will audit attendance records, and I've asked Secretary of State Karen Handel, Georgia's chief election officials, to audit the school board elections as for all propriety, including residency requirements. The third effort and attempt involves the accountability portion and will involve legislation. As governor, as policymakers of this state, even as strongly as we believe in local control, we must ensure that every school system, any Georgia school system, if they lose accreditation, the voters of that district will have the opportunity in a referendum vote at the next legal voting time to be given the choice of automatically replacing the members of the school board by referendum.
If school board members were voted out, Perdue says the State Board of Education would appoint a local board until regular elections could be held. He says right now the state has no authority to just go in and take over the school system. State School Superintendent Kathy Cox issued a statement following the governor's announcement saying she fully endorses his initiatives. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Sandra Parrish.
Okay, thank you very much, Sandra. Well, it's a couple days past the halfway point of the 08 session, and a few of Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle's initiatives have made their way through the Senate. We had a chance to talk with him today about his initiatives thus far and what to expect the rest of the session.
Obviously, the T-SPLOST dealing with transportation is a huge concern. The ability to authorize a 1-cent sales tax as an option to be levied to help local communities resolve their transportation concern is a top priority for all of us. The statewide water management plan, which now is done, we are beginning the process of putting the right people in place in these councils to ensure that we're managing that. We also have significant money for the reservoirs to come on board as well. That is a huge issue, assessing existing reservoirs, determining how much additional storage capacity could be there. That's going to take a lot of money, and we're beginning to work through that process as well. Of course, health care is another huge issue. 1.7 million people uninsured in Georgia today. We have the safety net clinic concept that we're moving forward on, as well as the health marketplace, which will really allow individuals to purchase the amount of insurance that they need at a price that they can afford. Very excited about that as well. And then, of course, making sure that we pass a good conservative balanced budget.
The Georgia Prescription Monitoring Program Act passed the House Rules Committee earlier today. This would require pharmacists to report prescriptions they fill to a statewide database monitored by the Georgia Drug and Narcotics Agency. Lawmakers Bridget Snapp is at the Capitol with more. Bridget.
Inwandi's sponsor of House Bill 455, Representative Ron Stevens, says his bill aims to stop what is called drug shopping, when people obtain prescriptions from different doctors and pharmacies. This type of situations made headlines last summer when professional wrestler Chris Benoit killed his wife and son before taking his own life.
We brought it up last year, and just, coincidentally, we had a death where one of the famous wrestlers here in the state of Georgia, because he was drug shopping and using many more narcotics than he should have, and using more than one physician, I understand, would have eliminated that problem, probably would have saved the life of this wrestler and would have saved the life of his family.
Representative Stevens told me that no such monitoring mechanism is currently in place in Georgia, unlike most other states in the southeast.
Currently, the way that Georgia does it is they go into every pharmacy whenever there's an alert. For example, somebody calls the Drugs and Narcotics Agency with an incident. Somebody's been hurt, somebody's in rehab, somebody has gotten in a car wreck with potential drugs in the car. And the only way that they can investigate now is go from pharmacy to pharmacy. Physicians can't even find out if somebody's drug shopping from one physician to another to get these narcotics. The only way they can find out again is through an incident and through an investigation.
Representative Stevens went on to say that the bill calls for federal funding and is scheduled to be on the House floor Tuesday. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Bridget Snapp.
Thanks so much, Bridget. In other news, the House voted today to outlaw the consumption of vaporized alcohol, also known as AWOL.
AWOL stands for alcohol without liquid, and what these machines are being used for, oxygen is bubbled through the alcohol to evaporate it, and then the alcohol is being inhaled directly into the lungs. Therefore, it goes directly into the bloodstream, straight to the brain. The problem being that you don't necessarily know how inebriated someone is. They don't even know because they don't feel the effect of it on their entire body sometimes until it's too late.
House Bill 1066 was amended to criminalize possession of the AWOL machines and to exempt medically prescribed inhalers and nebulizers. The measure passed 164-1 and goes to the Senate. The House also agreed to increase background checks for daycare workers beyond the current state Social Security check.
House Bill 904 will change that and require that both a NCIC federal background check as well as a GCIC state background check be done on a fingerprint. This will also apply to all individuals over the age of 18 in an in-home daycare center, and it will has the full support of DHR and the GBI.
House Bill 904 passed 159-1, and it heads to the Senate.
The Senate began this morning with a point of personal privilege from Senator Joseph Carter, telling everyone to be prepared to get in shape.
Donut lovers, couch potatoes, and those who cherish moments of inactivity, your days are numbered. Yesterday, I introduced legislation, the Student Health and Physical Education Act, or the SHAPE Act. it is time for Georgia to join in the fight that other states around us have begun to curb obesity among our youth.
After getting in shape, they got down to the business of passing legislation. Senator Doug Stoner explains SB 371, which was brought about because of a school bus accident at a railroad crossing.
We have school buses that are crossing at railroad crossings where they have no active warning signals. And what this bill would do is require an annual survey each year of all local school districts on their established school bus routes to determine where they have school buses that are crossing where there are no active warning lights or sounds as indicators.
After SB 371 passed 49-0, Senator Bill Hamrick explained legislation dealing with reproducing, transferring, and selling counterfeit recordings.
Basically, the illegal transfer from one recording device onto a CD, for example, to another, and then selling that for a profit. It's a big problem in Georgia. Last year we passed the bill easily through the House and the Senate, and then the governor had a problem with some of the restitution language, and it was vetoed, and so we worked with his office, and we now have the version of the bill that we think is acceptable to the governor.
And closing the day was SB 408, sponsored by Senator David Schaefer. This aims to add competition to the telephone industry.
What it does is increase competition in the telecommunications industry, making it easier for other telecommunications providers to enter the market and compete with AT&T and the other incumbent telephone carriers.
Now, Schaefer's SB 408 passed 42-4. All 5 bills that passed the Senate today now go over to the House. Senate President Pro Tem Eric Johnson spoke out yesterday against an amendment to the amended 08 budget offered by Senator Emanuel Jones. He criticized amendment supporters of not understanding the budget when it comes to the allocation of school equalization grants. Today, he took a point of personal privilege to apologize for how yesterday's comments may have come across, but stuck to his reasoning for why the Senate stands by their position on the 08 budget changes.
First thing I want to do is apologize to this body during the debate yesterday. Not for what I said, but for my tone. So particularly to the senator from the 10th and the senator from the 26th. I get extremely frustrated on budget matters, and that spilled over into my tone, and I want to apologize that I should not have been as angry sounding as I was. But the senator from the 10th has pointed out there are 16 counties that benefit from equalization money. 16. We have 180 in this state. 44 don't get any equalization at all, and those include our biggest ones: Atlanta, Fulton, DeKalb, Cobb, Chatham, Cherokee, Clark, Fayette, Forsyth, Glenn, Marietta, Oconee, and Walton don't get any equalization. Now, why is that important? Because if we can put the money into the austerity cuts and restore some or all of the QBE formula, those districts will get more money. So out of 180 systems, 16 benefit under equalization, and if we put money back into austerity, then 166 school districts will benefit from more money.
Well, it's the end of another legislative week. It's time to review this week's action with Tom Crawford, national editor of CapitolImpact.com. We began this week by talking about the progress of this year's budget.
Well, you have the major area of disagreement: how to pay for schools, how to pay for local education. There have been several austerity cuts over the last few years that have hurt some of the local school systems and forced them to raise property taxes. So the House people this year feel it's important to restore some of the austerity cuts and to restore funding for equalization grants, which is money that the state gives to some of the less wealthy school systems to help them out. The House wants to do something on that right away in the mid-year budget. The Senate feels it's an issue that's better put off until the 09 budget for the fiscal year that starts July 1. So that seems to be the major area of disagreement right now. Both sides in the end want to do the same thing. There's just a little bit of difference on when it should be done and how they should approach it.
Well, speaking of funding for education, we've seen that global tax reform package making its way out of committee this week.
That's right. Speaker Glenn Richardson's bill to eliminate part of the property taxes that people pay made it out of both the subcommittee and the committee this week. It's going to come up for a vote on the House floor next week, and that'll be one of the major votes of this session. In the current form, the Speaker's bill would take away the property taxes that people pay to their local school boards, also the ad valorem taxes that you pay every year when you get your auto license tag renewed. So it has a financial impact for the average Georgian, and there's a lot of political clout riding on this as well. It will require a two-thirds vote to get through the House, so right now there's some doubt as to whether it will or it will not. Should make next week very interesting.
Well, you know, speaking of having any clout, we've heard from educational systems, districts around the state, many of them feeling a little bit of a pinch perhaps coming down as a result of that. Do they have enough clout to have any pull in this argument?
Well, I think they do. There are a lot of school boards, a lot of school teachers in every legislative district, and I would imagine every legislator has probably heard from every teacher by now. So there is a lot of concern from them on the impact of this particular bill, and if the Speaker should be unable to get enough votes to push it through, it might well be because of the opposition we've seen from the education leaders.
Turning now to health care, we've seen some measures to create more oversight for Grady Memorial Hospital.
The Senate passed a package of bills this week that would do exactly that. It would set up an overview committee to monitor the activities and the spending of Grady Hospital, and it would also put in some conflict of interest provisions to prevent a situation where you have somebody who's serving on the hospital board and at the same time could be a contractor selling goods or services to the hospital. So these are all steps, I think, that will make Grady a better run hospital, perhaps, maybe restore some public confidence in it as well.
Well, in our last few moments that we have together here, we started the session with some legislation that would ban abortion here in Georgia. Seems to have hit a stumbling block at this point in the session.
I believe both bills dealing with the abortion issue probably are dead. They got long hearings in the House Judiciary Committee this past week. One of them is a constitutional amendment that's an attempt really to try to overturn the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade decision from 1973. The other was a bill that would have declared abortion to be tantamount to murder and would have provided for the prosecution of any doctor that performed an abortion on criminal felony charges. Some folks thought those were perhaps a little bit too drastic. The subcommittee heard a lot of testimony this week and in the end voted to do away with both of them, if you will. So I don't think we'll hear that issue again this session.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Tom. It's always great to have your insights.
A pleasure to be here.
The budget, health care, and even border wars were debated in both chambers the past few days. Here's a look back at this week in the Georgia General Assembly. Tuesday began with the Senate Appropriations Committee passing the 2008 supplemental budget. Senate President Pro Tem Eric Johnson explained the changes.
I think it's going to be an interesting debate on education, and that's the biggest change, and that will be the biggest discussion for the conference committee.
But House Majority Leader Jerry Keene did not agree with the Senate changes to the House version.
If you'll look in their language, they basically said we're going to put the $72 million toward funding of the equalization grants in the 2009, which if you take the wording that they put in there, basically says no money for computers and technology, no money for school buses.
Also on Tuesday, the Senate passed credit freeze legislation aimed to protect consumers from identity theft.
We would give the Commissioner of Banking and Finance the opportunity to take information like this from the AARP to determine what that actual cost is, and he cannot set the price at any amount above that cost.
On Wednesday, the border war with Tennessee began.
Water is the key to the issue, and we have never given up our riparian water rights.
The border of this state is the 35th parallel. The 35th parallel is where it has always been, and it's not a matter of moving the border or switching people from one state to another. It's simply a matter of accurately finding and marking that border.
The measure to create a border committee passed both chambers overwhelmingly. Also on Wednesday, a local transportation funding tax option passed the Senate. Senate Transportation Chairman Jeff Mullis explains the T-SPLOST.
The boundaries of the counties wishing to participate in this special fund will form single regional transportation special districts, perhaps. The tax may be approved by voters in the regional transportation special district that may be created.
And on Thursday, the 2008 supplemental budget passed the Senate floor, but there was debate over changes to education funding.
In raw numbers, yes, it does represent an overall increase, but in practice, it represents a $30 million cut to education.
The debate about equalization grant does not belong in the 2008 budget. It belongs in the 2009.
Budget issues remained in the forefront in the House as House leadership discussed the 2009 big budget priorities.
That is to fully restore the $141 million in the austerity cuts.
Focus on increasing access to health care.
We strongly support the governor's initiatives to address the long-term water needs of the state of Georgia.
Continuing our pledge to support the people that are working to keep Georgia safe. We're going to do that by working toward a pay package to help us recruit the best qualified candidates and retain them so that we keep their experience and their expertise in public safety.
Also on Thursday, 3 bills sponsored by Senator David Schaefer relating to Grady Memorial Hospital passed the Senate. One sets up a Grady Oversight Committee. And that's a look back at this week in the Georgia General Assembly.
As we first reported last night, a bill limiting police access to no-knock warrants passed out of the Senate Judiciary Committee yesterday evening. Lawmakers Andy Dixon has more on the bill and the committee's actions.
Last session, the committee gave a do-pass recommendation to the same legislation, but Senate Bill 259 got stuck in the Senate Rules Committee. The bill heads to that committee next. The legislation was prompted by the death of elderly Atlanta resident Katherine Johnston, who was killed by undercover police officers in November of 2006. Some have suggested that the bill is reactionary and may have unintended consequences for officers and citizens.
The concern is that when you establish a standard, such as the standard they've set in that bill, which is more than reasonable suspicion, which is the current standard to obtain just the no-knock provision of the bill, you've gone past what the courts have already said is an acceptable level.
Senator Vincent Ford of Atlanta introduced the measure.
It's long overdue. Ms. Johnston died more than a year ago in a way that no one should have to die. So we're really hoping that the legislature will move forward on this.
Only time will tell if the legislation reaches the Senate floor this year. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Andy Dixon.
College-bound high school students, pay attention. There is an online resource that can help you in more ways than one. Lawmakers Minu Hosseini heads the 411.
It was Georgia College 411 Day at the Capitol, and the event was kicked off by Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle.
Education has always been a very important issue to me, and I have always been a firm believer that if we create the right opportunities for our students to achieve their success, we're going to make our state a better place. I can tell you firsthand, as a father of 3 boys, we accessed Georgia 411 as well, and it's a great resource.
The event featured stations for participating high school students. Each station highlighted one aspect of the college application process. For example, how to load a transcript online or how to apply for financial aid.
I just recently did a resume with the resume builder. Georgia College 401 also offers free test preps for the SATs, ACT, EOCTs for all subjects, and high school graduation tests.
The website's newest feature is the Hope Progress Report, which allows high school students to electronically track their GPA as it applies to the Hope Scholarship. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Minu Hosseini.
As interesting as it is to see and visit the House and Senate during the legislative session, there are other attractions under the Gold Dome.
Did you know that inside the Georgia State Capitol is a museum as old as the Capitol itself? The exhibits illustrate the state's natural and economic resources.
A common symbol Georgians are proud of is the Georgia State peach, and visitors can also learn how the delicious peaches are packaged.
Other displays include minerals of Georgia. The Georgia Capitol Museum's minerals collection of over 2,000 specimens represents 200 commonly found minerals in the state.
Visitors can also learn more about the faces and events that change Georgia's history.
We all know football is the American sport. But did you know that in 1897, University of Georgia's player Richard Vonnegut Gammon suffered a fatal brain concussion during a game? And within a day, the General Assembly passed a bill outlawing football at all state institutions? Thankfully, in 1929, Governor Atkinson's veto made it possible to continue play at UGA.
Other exhibits include a two-headed calf born in 1987 in Palmetto, a life-size Mississippian chief that once governed large sections of Georgia and adjacent states, and there is more where that came from. So the Capitol has more to offer than you think. Next time you are in Atlanta, downtown, please feel free to visit.
For visitor hours and directions, log on to www.sos.state.ga.us and click on the State Capitol tab to your right.
Good information. That story was written, produced, shot, and edited by our own Caroline Yaga. Well, the Chatham County delegation yesterday remembered the 9 people who lost their lives in the Dixie Sugar Refinery explosion, the 16 burn victims who are still hospitalized, and the heroes who ensured that the casualties weren't greater.
We have with us today James Tennessee Handman, Brenda Rose, Scott Bulwer, and Dean Jordan. You know, there are stories of the heroic measures that were taken. 2 people went into the boiler room and turned off the boiler that saved countless lives that night, and some went in multiple times to receive numerous injured employees. One of these people is a long-term employee who was actually born on the plant property. And we want to thank y'all, and we want y'all to know that you have been in our prayers, and we're certainly with you. Thank you.
Well, the Senate honored a distinguished guest yesterday. Senator Chip Pearson introduces us to his nearly 100-year-old Papa.
This is Papa, and Papa is going to be 100 years old on April 28th. I don't know that I will be around April 28th of this year, but I know that Papa will be, and I certainly appreciate on behalf of our family you taking this moment of recognition for him this morning. Papa, you want to say anything about nearly 100 years of life?
Well, I could tell all these good people that here's a man that is ready for a president. No.
Thank you, Papa, and make sure that your check's in the mail this week. But they saw me present a bill yesterday. I need a little bit more work.
Well, Senator Pearson has not made his presidential candidacy official, but we know he has at least one very distinguished endorsement. Well, lawmakers will not be seen Monday because the Georgia General Assembly will not be in session. Lawmakers returns Tuesday night at 7 with all the latest Capitol news. And if you have missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, tune in Monday morning when Lawmakers repeats at 5:30 a.m. You can also keep up with all the action under the Gold Dome daily on your local GPB radio station during Morning Edition, All Things Considered, and evenings at 6 p.m. on Georgia Gazette. Now stay tuned for Rick Steve's Europe Classics. Tonight's episode features the Alps of Austria and Italy. That program is coming up next here on GPB.
And that's our broadcast for this, the 22nd legislative day of 2008. I'm Inwandi Lawson.
And I'm David Zelski. Have a great weekend. We'll see you Tuesday.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.